And tonight we'll bring you all the latest developments on new membership of the BRICS nations and the BRICS bloc. What will it mean for the strength of the bloc in building its own influence as a counterpoint, counterweight and counterbalance to nations in the West? Let's take you back to the Sandton Convention Centre, and that's where Bongiwe Zwane is with some of our colleagues and analysts.
Thank you very much, Iman. And of course, the issue of the expansion has been spoken about for the better part of the day. I mean, the expansion has seen Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates being admitted into the BRICS bloc. And Iman, of course, it's now, anybody's guess as to how does this relationship continue to unfold. It's interesting that we still don't know at the stage what the criteria is. How do they chart a way forward? And a lot of us are wanting to see what's on the dotted line in terms of the agreed criteria there. And of course, as they take up their membership on the 1st of January, a lot of people will be looking to see how these dynamics will be at play, as well as, of course, some of the countries will be watching with keen interest as to what happens now. I'm not alone, Iman. I've got Thembisa Fakude, Director of Africa-Asia Dialogues, as well as Political Editor Mzwandile Mbeje, who are joining us this afternoon. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
A lot has been said, and I'm going to start with you, Thembisa, because a lot has been said about the presence of the Middle East in this particular bloc. Not that we did not know that they were knocking on the doors, but I wonder, what are your thoughts on their now official admission as of the 1st of January next year?
Well, I think it's very interesting, but the combination of the countries that have been included in this new BRICS. So we've got three Gulf countries, which is Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. If you remember, not long ago, Iran and Saudi Arabia were not seeing eye to eye. So they've since been engaged in rapprochement. And I think what BRICS will do will further improve that relationship. Then we've got Egypt, of course, which is known as the most populous Arab nation. It had to be included. So those four nations are interesting. But the fact that we've got three from the Gulf, very wealthy in terms of natural resources. United Arab Emirates is very, very ambitious in terms of its economic plans globally. Saudi Arabia, you know, is very maverick with its own investment in economic strategies. So I think overall this is going to benefit BRICS, and is likely to bring African countries much more closer to the Gulf, and hopefully all of us are going to benefit.
Is the Gulf, though, moving closer in your reading? Because while we are, it's one thing to say African countries moving closer, but is the Gulf looking like it's moving closer to African countries?
I think it is moving closer. No one can really resist the temptation of exploring African resources. And Mozambique is just next door. We've seen both the United Arab Emirates and other Gulf countries competing to be number one in terms of gas exploration in that country. South Africa becomes relevant because we have got big guns. Should the investment fail, they can call on us to go and assist, given that there's, of course, the threat of Al-Qaeda from the north of Mozambique and the Shabab from the north of Mozambique. So I think the Gulf countries are going to move closer to Africa.
I see a lot of nods, Mzwai.
Oh yes, certainly. In fact, the Gulf countries, if I were to put it that way, in fact, they've got their own organization, by the way, the Gulf. So what they are doing, and you will agree with me here, is that they've been opening up to the world. In fact, we've just had the World Cup in the Gulf region. We are seeing big soccer stars going to Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
So you can see they also have a strategy of opening up. As they open up, they want to be central in shaping exactly the new world order that we are seeing being played out. And what I think I have noticed with these countries, what normally happens is that the poorer countries would normally sit in the corner and complain the West is doing this, is doing that. But what we are seeing here, you are seeing people who are saying, we are taking the bull by its horns. We want a transformed world, let's do it. So that's exactly what is happening. In fact, who wants to go with us? These are the people who want to go with us. Remember, those countries applied to be part of BRICS, and then they are going together. This is fairly new, but already you can see where they're headed.
And Mzwai, one then asks the question that as they make their presence then into this particular bloc now, one can say to be felt, because they certainly won't be silent, when it comes to some of the conversations that take place. I wonder what becomes the dynamic then, as they take over, because are we looking at a big brother kind of approach? What are we looking at here?
BRICS, I would say, vision or approach is much bigger than perhaps what we are talking about. We have been hearing a lot about de-dollarization. We have been hearing a lot about use of local currencies. We have been hearing a lot about transforming the architecture of the global economic structure. We have been hearing a lot. So how do you do that? You get those who have resources, you get those who are interested, you get those who have the know-how. If you look at the combination of all these countries, they were very strategic, Bongiwe. They didn't just pick any country that applied. I mean, 22 countries had applied, they only took 6. So why? Very strategic. Look at the regions, look at their resources, natural resources, and look at the bigger plan that BRICS wants to achieve. So you are complaining about the issue of money, and everything that's related to it. Where do we get the most oil from? Who do we trade with the most at the moment as the world? Because all of us headed to Saudi Arabia to get that oil in dollars. We are de-dollarizing. Saudi Arabia is still there. What is that?
I'm going to come back to the to the conversation of the currency, because that in itself, being sent back to the finance ministers and the central bank governors, was very interesting. But let's talk about that in a second, Mzwandile. But Thembisa, one of the things that Mzwandile is talking about is the selection criteria, and how it seems to have been carefully thought out as to who gets to be part of this now. But we still are waiting to know exactly what the criteria is, how the expansion works, and possibly maybe all the others who are knocking on the doors can see if they are going to be allowed in or not, based on what's possibly on paper.
Well, it's been, to an extent, disappointing. I was looking for much more, higher standards in terms of selection. And if you look at these 3 countries... Are
you saying the standards are low?
I think so. I think, Iran not long ago had killed one activist by the name of Mahsa Amini because she was not adorning a scarf or hijab in an appropriate way. And there were protests that followed, and many activists were jailed, some of whom were convicted and sentenced to death. Saudi Arabia, went to Istanbul and abducted Jamal Khashoggi, chopped his head and dissolved him in an acid. You have United Arab Emirates that led an unjust war against the Houthis in Yemen. So when it comes to that, I think we have been failed. I would have expected a much more higher agenda. The other thing, of course, I'm disappointed that Nigeria is not, for obvious reasons, because Nigeria is ECOWAS and currently waging a war against Nigeria, who we have seen who's there at the moment. So that is also interesting. But for me, the most interesting inclusion is Egypt and Ethiopia. Because, the Grand Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia, there's been that conflict and contestation between the 2 countries. Now I think they'll find a platform through which they can negotiate.
So when it comes then to, some analysts in the lead up to the summit have been saying then that it might look like some of the countries you've touched on may be wanting to be part of BRICS to clean up the image somewhat. So listening to what you're saying, would you be inclined to basically side with that particular argument?
I think so. I think they want to clean their image. But last night we saw an aeroplane falling from the sky, killing Yevgeny Prigozhin, who is the leader of the Wagner Group. So again, that was a damper as far as I'm concerned, because it pulls away from the gains that we've seen over the past couple of days, because a certain country which is part of BRICS is now accused of having committed that crime. I'm not going to mention names, but I think you're correct. There is an element of PR, particularly from the 3 countries that are entering BRICS. And hopefully they will benefit us as Africans in particular, because we are interested in seeing economic development. We're interested in the development of our young human resource. Our young people need jobs. And countries such as the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia they come with very deep pockets, and hopefully they will invest in socio-economic projects in Africa.
And Mzwai, one of the things that is also, very clear is a lot of what we heard when various leaders were speaking from day one, inclusivity. And looking at even some of the countries that have now made the cut, it also does look like they extended themselves to say that we are not only accepting a certain type, but we are moving towards this inclusivity that has been spoken about a lot.
Inclusivity and diversity. President of China said, in our diversity we draw strength. So because their ambitions are much bigger, you are not going to confine yourself to the like-minded. You are going to look at people who will assist you in expanding that influence. In Africa, we are already 3. And very strategic: South, East, North. And then Middle East, 3 countries. You look at Asia, obviously Europe would obviously be represented by China. And you go to South America, very key country, 2 biggest economies, Brazil and Argentina. So you can see, and of course, I did speak about Iran, you can see that they thought about this. What is it that we want to do? How do we want to do it? Who can help us achieve that? We're not talking military power here. We're talking the economic muscle. I mean, in South America, you've got 2 biggest economies. In Africa, you've got South Africa, which is technically, I know they're saying we're the 2nd biggest, but in reality, we're still the biggest. I think he can tell you, we're still the biggest. And then you've got, what is the other one? Egypt, and then Ethiopia. And then you go to Middle East, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and then I'm not going to speak about China and India. So those are powerhouses. So already you've got these powerful blocks economically and even politically that are working with you towards redesigning, reimagining the global world.
And this conversation, of course, of the currency is also, being looked at. Now we're hearing this morning that it's being sent back to, the de-dollarization conversation, to the finance ministers, to the central bank governors, to talk about it, deliberate, and possibly come up with a response at next year's summit. How does the United States or even the West look at what is unfolding right now? Because one could argue that, yes, they may not have taken a decision right now, but it might seem like a phased-in approach.
Yeah, it's a very interesting comment, but I don't think it's the same time that America will sit and watch BRICS developing and threatening its existence. I think there will be a pushback. We've already seen Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary of the US, and Antony Blinken going to India before this meeting, and they met with Prime Minister Modi, and there was a charm offensive. Prime Minister Modi was then later invited to the United States, and he later went to France. So these are some of the actions that, both of them went to China, I'm sorry. They went to China to visit on a charm offensive to Xi Jinping, that is Janet Yellen and Antony Blinken. And then later on, Prime Minister Modi was invited to the US and later on went to France. So there is that pushback. And I think Lula da Silva, who has been my star in this conference, has also indicated some sort of a certain position that is not going to be popular. One, he has rebuffed or snapped the request for him to host the next BRICS Summit, opting to organize and host IPSA. That in itself tells you that there's something going on. But overall, I think it's a positive development that we've got these countries coming together. We're going to have more opportunities as African countries, and I think under the leadership of President Cyril Ramaphosa, who has, by the way, impressed me after a very long time, over the past couple of days, I think we're likely to see a champion of a new BRICS Plus that will benefit Africa.
Is it a rebuff though, Mzwai, or is it a logistics issue? He simply possibly didn't have the logistical ability to have it, have 2 big events?
So whichever way you look at it, Russia in this instance takes the center stage. Remember, these countries will be paraded in Russia. President Putin will be the star of the show. Whether Brazil decided, because remember they have a bigger one, which is the G20. Oh, by the way, we also have ours in 2025. So the BRICS countries, this year it's India, next year it's Brazil, and then it's South Africa 2025. So I guess we can boast a bit. I'm sure President Ramaphosa will be very happy. You've just given him credit right now.
Yes, if he's watching, he's happy with
he'll be very happy. But basically what is happening, remember, as much as Brazil is a big economy, but when you host an organization like the G20, it takes a lot of resources. So probably the reason, and also there's the issue of President Putin that is still ongoing.
Yeah.
He probably may not want to face the situation that South Africa had to face. It's like, at the moment, okay, let me deal with G20. This one will sort itself out. But what it does is that it puts President Putin in Russia as the star of the show. Just imagine next year when that BRICS is expanded, when Putin is the center of the show. And then what does that say to the West?
And I know we are out of time for now, but when we come back, I want us to talk about that. Like, what does it look like? The photo op, we saw the photo op yesterday, the 5 of them lifting their hands, united together. What does it look like when it happens in Russia with 5+? What does it mean now? It's going to be 11. But Iman, there's quite a lot to talk about as we, of course, even look ahead to the China, the South Africa-China dialogue that is set to be happening as well this particular evening. Sophie Mokoena, international news editor, is also watching that for us, Iman, and we'll continue to bring you more from that during the course of the evening. But it's back to you for now in studio.
Thank you so much, Bongiwe, for that comprehensive analysis with Thembisa, Fakude and Mbeje. We will continue to bring you the latest on the BRICS developments. As Bongiwe said, there is still the China engagement, and we're going to hear what comes up out of that.